Based on the graphic novels by Mike Mignola, a demon named Hellboy is caught between the worlds of the supernatural and human and battles an ancient sorceress who is hell-bent on revenge. This movie is largely faithful to its origins and doesn't try to over-explain too much, but it sadly sacrifices proper pacing and has a bit of a clunky narrative. It does also pander to some hardcore fans of Hellboy like myself, but never tries to isolate the rest of the audience too much. The movie is thrilling, humorous, and has the balls to go pedal to the metal with its violence, horror, and gore when needed. The characters are done pretty well and had some great acting, especially from David Harbour, who takes the role of Hellboy and really owns it. As much as I liked Ron Perlman's take on the original, I really felt David Harbour was a legitimate Hellboy. He looked, he sounded, he had the personality, he had everything that I really wanted in a Hellboy film. The practical effects in this movie are excellent, and the CGI for a film that has a lower budget than its predecessors is pretty good in a lot of scenes. The story is overall fine, but it could have been done a lot better and definitely a lot cleaner. Some parts of the narrative do work, such as Hellboy's struggles with the BPRD and his destiny, which wasn't explored as much in the original films, but there just was so much that they throw at you. For any regular moviegoers, or maybe some people who were fans of the original two films, this might be a bit of a disappointment to you. And also, it is kind of the best not really to compare this film with the originals, for it doesn't really try to top them, and it just really wants to isolate itself to be a new rendition. So even though there are things that you have seen in the original two films, such as the repeat of Hellboy's origins, it doesn't try to be a retrend. It tries to be its own thing, which I can admire for it, but at the same time I can kind of see why people might be annoyed with it. If you were fans of the original, then you probably liked how those ones were better than this one, and yeah, it totally makes sense. While her performance by Mila Jovovich is good, she wasn't threatening or memorable. She's not the worst comic book villain that has ever existed. There have been a whole ton worse, but she wasn't really that imposing. In a way, this movie kind of reminds me of the first Blade movie, in which it was, even though it was very faithful to its source material, the narrative wasn't really that great, but it had great performances, great action, and yeah, even though it had some of the 90s cheese in it, it was still a very entertaining movie. I was very entertained with this Hellboy. A lot more entertained than the originals, I'll say. If you want to see a dark comic book film that kind of goes off the rails and does actually have fun with it, then this is definitely the movie for you. Even if you're not into the whole comic book trend or anything like it, it's just a mindless flick that really just helps out. And even if you did prefer the original films, I still recommend the movie to give it a watch, because who knows, you might have a good time with it too, just like I did. I'm going to give Hellboy a 7.8 out of 10. While it's not certainly as bad as people are making it out to be, or the critics and stuff, you can definitely see where there were a lot of issues, and perhaps even studio interference. I still recommend watching it, because I do think it does have the potential to be something more, with this new director and of course with David Harbour being a great Hellboy. So check it out when you can.